Hey, what's up guys? It's Wawi here, and today we're talking about ST stacking. That's right, we're actually doing a tutorial. It's been literally a year since I've done my last tutorial, and people have asked for all sorts of stuff. I had to do a how to play fast 2, I had to do a million different setups that I haven't gone over yet. I haven't talked about a single mid-game strategy thing yet, but it's whatever, because we're talking about ST stacking. We're finally back to it. All right, so ST stacking. First of all, what is ST stacking? So ST stacking is one of the most efficient long-term ways to get points consistently. Technically, the way that I do it and the way that I'm going to be showing today should be called ZT stacking because I do it on the right side of the screen, in which case it's using a Z piece and not an S piece. But most people just call it ST stacking regardless of which side of the screen it's on, just because that was the original name for it. And so it's the most common strategy that people use in timed games like Tetris Ultra and Tetris Blitz. It's not the best way to play for multiplayer unless you're trying to like BM your opponent because you're way better than them. But it can still be good for getting high scores on some single player version. And also, personally, this is the setup that got me first used to the 7-bag system in Tetris. If you don't know what the 7-bag system is, I recommend you go watch my Intro to Multiplayer Tetris tutorial because I explain it there. But basically, it gets used to the randomizing system that most modern Tetris games use. All right, so the setup for ST stacking. So the setup, I think, is the most daunting part for people because once they sort of see people do ST stacking, they sort of can see how the pattern goes. But getting to a place where the pattern can start can be daunting for some people. So I think a very common opener that people can just memorize is this one right here. It uses an L piece and a J piece. And like, you can just like copy these first few piece placements here. So I call that the LJ opener. There's also an I spin opener. I'm going to be showing both of these openers when I demo some ST stacking near the end of this video. But basically, no matter what setup you use, you can even improvise. And I'm going to be improvising most of mine when we do the examples. But as long as you like accomplish the basic goals here, then it doesn't really matter what you do. So the goal is that you want to use the whole first bag, obviously, and then you want to make the center flat. So the center is this like middle 3 portion here. You want to make sure that there's, so you see that for the LJ setup, the double O piece here is making a flat center. You want to make sure that you dump one of your Z pieces on the right and you use the other one as part of your setup. As you see, this opener accomplishes that. And you want to make sure you use 2 T pieces without starting to T-spin. Just to make sure that your Z and T parity works out before you transition to the mid game. So that's what I mean when I say that ST stacking helps you to get used to the 7-bag system. Because as you see, since we've used 2 Z pieces and 2 T pieces, it'll make sure that in the mid game, we always have the same number so that we don't have one hanging. And yeah, so that's it. So this I spin opener down here, you see it does the same thing. So use the whole first bag. It immediately has a very flat center earlier than the other opening did. It used 1 Z piece on the right and 1 Z piece in the actual stack. And then it dumped 2 T pieces without spinning into the stack. So from here, we transition to the mid game, which is sort of the meat and potatoes of ST stacking. So in the mid game, we want to keep track of 3 sections of your stack. There's the right side where you're going to be doing a lot of Tetrising and T-spinning. There's the center of the stack where you're going to be placing a lot of S pieces and L pieces in order to create the overhang for the T's. And we're going to talk about S parity later on when we talk about the center in more depth. And then on the left side, you mainly want to keep it flat, and if you can, you want to keep it even with the center. So in this case, the center is too low, and so we would have to correct for that with like an O plus J or something. There's also a hanging S piece. So this is actually a pretty bad example. I don't know why I put it here, because the center did not maintain S parity, and the left side is not flat. But that's okay. Right side pretty self-explanatory, but we'll go into that in more detail also. So first we're going to talk about the center because that's sort of the main part of the ST stack. Everything else is in order to maintain the center. So for the most part, if you can, you want to just keep placing S and J pieces in the center. And this is going to be like the most common way that you continue your stack. Sometimes if in the previous example you saw that the center was too low compared to the left side, and then you want to place an additional piece per bag into the center in order to even that out. And so in that case, you would use OJ in order to keep it higher. If the opposite were true and your center were too high compared to the left side, then you would have to place an S and a L into the left side. So basically, like, these would normally go in the left side and these would normally go in the center, but you can put both of them in the center or both of them in the left side, depending on whether you need to keep the left side higher or keep the center higher, and you want to keep them roughly the same. Because there's only one S piece and L piece per bag, it's pretty dangerous to do an L plus O setup. But sometimes if the T piece is coming too soon, then you can't hold the L piece how you would normally. And if you can't hold the L piece, then you can't wait for the S before putting it down, which means you're going to have to do an L plus O setup, in which case you have something called a hanging S, which is a very common problem in ST stacking in general. And then last but least, there's Z plus J here, and that's pretty much only used in the setup, because in the setup, as we talked about, the first Z piece has to be on the right side, and then the second one has to be used in the stack. And after that, every Z piece is pretty much just going to be used to T-spin. And so besides the very beginning, we're not really ever going to use Z plus J. Then there's one other part where we can use Z plus J, which is that eventually we're going to have to reset, and then we'll use Z plus J later. But then we're going to be talking about resetting later, so we're going to ignore that one for now. So then sometimes, like, because you don't get ideal positions, like I said, if both the T piece and the L piece are coming at the same time, then you're going to have to get creative because you're going to have a hanging S. And then a lot of like center strategies can be used to make up for the fact that you have a hanging S. So for example, in this scenario, because you have a hanging S, you don't have an L to complete your center shape. And therefore you have to do this like fancy version using the O pieces and I piece here in order to complete the same shape. And the idea is that as long as we keep an empty square and then two full squares, and then everything on the other two columns are full, as you can see, all of these use that same pattern. And so as long as we keep that, we can get really creative. And then if we've been good and we've kept our left side the same as our center, then we can actually use that in our creativity in order to get rid of some hanging S pieces. In fact, this one on the bottom left here gets rid of two S pieces in one fell swoop. So if you have some crazy situation where you, for some reason, you had to LO twice and you have two hanging S pieces, it may seem like a disaster, but you see that like both of these setups, or not this one, but this setup actually gets rid of two hanging S's at the same time, which is really nice. So as long as you can maintain this like one empty and two full pattern in your center, then you'll continue to continue the stack. All right, so the left side. The left side is mostly you're trying to play around your center. And so like depending on what had to happen for your center to survive, then your left side has to play accordingly. So if your center is going fine and you just continuously drop S's and L's into the center of your board, then it's pretty easy to do the left side because you just continually place the J's, O's, and I's, and those pieces fit very nicely together. And the reason why they fit nicely together is because we use two T pieces in the setup. If we only used one T piece in the setup, then the parity of the left side would be messed up and we would never be able to actually play in it. So here we see that some of the examples of the left side, we've had to use an L piece. And sometimes that happens because sometimes the L piece comes before the S, and if we are in a situation where we can't hold it, then we have to put it there. And because of that, we want to keep track of when we have a hanging S piece, because when we do have a hanging S piece, we want to make it something like this or this, so that we can make sure to put our hanging S piece on the left side, because there won't be any room to put it in the center. Sometimes you can get creative with putting hanging S pieces. For example, for this top right one, if you put the S piece right on top, it'll actually end up like this, because you can do a J spin in order to put the J into that hole at the end. And so there's usually a good way to get rid of your S pieces, as long as you're keeping track of it. And then your J's versus your I's, whenever you place your O piece, you have to keep track of whether a J or an I is coming next, because oftentimes you can be pretty flexible with where you put your O piece. So for example, like if we had this board and we had an O piece coming up, then we can put it right in the center if we know that we're going to put like an I piece right next to it. Or if we know that we need the I piece to Tetris, then we should actually put it on the right side of the left side. The right side of the left side. You guys know what I mean, right? And then that way the J piece can fit right next to it. I know it's kind of hard to visualize when I say that, but I promise all of these will make sense when I show examples. Eventually on the left side, we're going to have to dump Z pieces and T pieces for the reset. But again, we're going to talk about reset on one of the last slides. So we don't want to worry about that yet. So lastly, the right side. So the right side is pretty self-explanatory. You pretty much just put the Z piece there and then you execute a T-spin. If you don't know how to execute T-spins, you should watch my previous tutorials, because I have several where I talk about it. Both intro to T-spins, and then I have one on TKI3, which is another setup where you can learn T-spins. So if you don't know how to execute the T-spin, you should watch one of those tutorials instead. But the little bit of finesse that is required, finesse in a general sense, not finesse in the Tetris sense, the little bit of skill, I guess, that's required for the right side is knowing when to Tetris. We see in this situation that the eyepiece could go on the far right side or the center. If given a choice, we always want to put it on the far right side. And that's because if we ever have a situation where we need to emergency Tetris, then regardless of whether or not the Z piece is there, we'll always be able to put it in the center. Versus if the Z piece is there and we have to emergency Tetris, then we actually won't be able to do it on the far right side. So when we have the choice, it's always better to put it in the more difficult one, because the easier one can always come later, versus the hard one, you might not be able to get it later. And then the other thing to pay attention to is that on things like J-Stress, this doesn't matter. But in the old Tetris Friends, or on some variants where the soft drop speed is pretty important, like Tetris just came out recently. So in that version, you would have to delay your Tetris as long as possible, or your quad in the case of Tetris, because they cannot call it Tetris, because it is not Tetris. It is a separate game. Anyway, you would have to delay it as much as possible, because you want to make sure that you're not soft dropping your T pieces longer than you need to, because in a lot of these games, time is the limiting factor. And so you don't want to be spending too much time soft dropping. And so the longer you delay your Tetris, if you can put two eye pieces all the way on the right side, it's actually better, because you don't need to soft drop your T that long, and you'll actually fit in more T spins into the same amount of time. The other thing you need to watch out for when playing on the right side is sometimes if you hone in on the T-spin, when it gets really close to the reset mark, then you might accidentally clear a T-spin single instead of a T-spin double if you're not careful about watching your left side and making sure that it's keeping up with your right side stack. All right, so finally resetting. So I've alluded to this several times throughout this tutorial, but now I'm going to go more in depth about it. So basically, if you play fast enough, eventually the right side will just be too high for your center and left side stack. And you won't be able to clear T-spin doubles anymore, because there won't be enough like full blocks on your left side and center in order to complete the full line. And so for that, you actually need to place two whole bags into the center and left side in order to get it high enough and before you continue ST stacking. And so, like, most importantly is you need to keep track of the Z pieces and the T pieces, because those would be the ones that would normally be going on the right side. So if you're dumping two full bags into the left side, then you basically, in practical terms, that means you dump two Z pieces and two T pieces, because all the other pieces would be in the center and left side anyway. before you go for a reset, you want to make sure your screen is as low as possible. So if you've been saving up Tetrises, you want to make sure you execute them before you go for the reset. So you see that in this case, this like double T formation here was used for a reset in this player's game. And this tends to happen around 55,000 points in Tetris Ultra mode on Tetris and the old Tetris friends, where you get to the point where you need to reset. So if you make sure that you leave enough room, then it'll make sure that you can continue your ST stack afterwards. Okay, so before I go to the end slide, I'm just going to quickly show some examples of ST stacking. So if we just go back to my title screen for a sec, let me open up Tetris. All right, cool. So I'm not going to try to go fast here. I'm mainly just going to talk about doing all the concepts that I talked about. So in this case, we can go, like I already see the setup that I can go for here. And so the first Z piece obviously goes on the side, and then I want to make sure that I create a flat part in the middle. And so to do that, an easy way to do it in this case is using the L piece and the O piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then from here, I want to make sure that we keep a flat top here. And because we used an O piece in the setup, we're not going to have the O piece that we would normally have in the center. And so I'm actually going to have to be a little bit creative and use this combination of the J plus the I to get there. And then like I talked about earlier, we want to make sure we use 2 T pieces on the left side / center in the opening. And so we're just going to go ahead and put the second T piece there. And then from here, we're pretty much all set. The only thing we haven't accomplished yet is getting rid of one more J piece. And so to do that, in this case, it's actually pretty easy. I can just put it down. And then from here, it's actually, it's pretty simple. So then we can just transition to like normal ST stacking from here, all right? I'm gonna wait for a problem to occur so that I can explain what's happening. So in this case, like you wanna see whether you wanna put like this O piece on this side or this side. Because I just put a J piece there, it was actually better to put it in the center, but I couldn't delay the thing long enough. But yeah, that's actually going to make things awkward, but we're going to see if we can deal with that. So you see that now we because of the awkward pieces that came, we actually had to use an LO piece in the center, and that's going to cause a hanging green. So you can see the problem with the hanging green is that when I put this next green piece in the center, there's going to be another green piece before the O even comes, which is going to be hard because we only have one hold piece. And so that's why we want to use one of our S pieces in the center. Oh wait, 2 minutes is over. Shoot, I don't have time to like explain this and also do it. Here, ready? I'm going to do it in sprint, okay? Or is there like freestyle mode? What's practice? Oh, practice. All right. So anyway, we're starting over from the beginning. So this is actually a situation where the I-spin setup works, and like knowing which setup works is mostly just experience. If you just memorize the setups, then you'll see like which pieces need to come early for which one to work. So in this case, I'm going to do the I-spin setup. And remember, this I-spin, if you haven't watched my spins and twists tutorial, you should, so that you understand how to do that. But the quick version is you have to rotate it clockwise in the air and then clockwise again when it hits the ground in order to do this particular spin. So one nuanced part of the I-spin setup is that if we're in a situation like this where the O piece isn't coming for a while, we have to make sure not to place the Z piece in the beginning. Because that way it gives us room to put the O piece there before the Z piece. So if this O piece were going to come even later, then I could have put the Z piece actually on top here, because we're going to have to use one in the setup anyway, along with the one that has to go on the right side. And so it's good to put this one here first if we're still waiting on the O piece to show up. So just like we're going to follow our rules and place the second T piece on the stack. Now at this point, you could just go straight into your ST stacking, but if you noticed, we actually used a Z plus J piece in the center, and so we actually have to even out the left side part of our stack. And so I'm going to place one S plus L pair onto the left side, because that's going to help even out the stack now, as you guys can see. So from here, we can ST stack as normal. All right, I misdropped, but I mostly want to go over the opening. But yeah, that's a pretty good example. I can't really show this as well as maybe I used to because as you guys who have watched my stream know, I have not played Tetris in a while. But anyway, I'm going to show a few more examples of the opening just to show that we hit all our goals, right? So in this case, the iSpin setup works again. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. The iSpin setup is actually really good in that it works like the majority of the time. And so you can just go ahead and do it a lot. So here we have to get creative. Like we could go for this T-spin, but as you see, it's not going to clear any lines right now. And we still haven't completed our goal of putting 2 T pieces in the left side of the stack in the beginning. And so I actually have to place this one over here using a T-spin-esque thing here. So that's something that you guys can watch out for. So again, we have a choice with this O piece of whether to put it here or here. And in this case, it's pretty obvious because we see that our I piece is coming up right there on our next piece queue. And so we're just going to go ahead and place it here. And then that makes it a lot easier. And once again, we have a choice for our O piece. If we saw that an I piece was coming, we would place it here because then if the I piece went here, then we could put the J piece next to it. But because the J piece is coming first, then we can just go ahead and put it like so, and it'll make things just a-okay. So we can just go ahead and keep stacking here. Once again, we have a choice with our O piece, and so we're gonna go ahead and put it there. Now we have a problem where we have to hold the O piece because there's not a good place to put it yet. But unfortunately, we don't have our S piece yet. So this is an example where you end up with a hanging green because we're gonna have to put in L plus O in the center. So now I'm looking out for a place to dump my extra S piece. And in this case, it just so happens that I see a situation to put my left side like so, and it actually allows me to get rid of that S piece. As you can see, by keeping the left side even with the center, it made it really easy for me to deal with that hanging S in this specific situation. So here we can just keep on stacking. Oops. You can tell I'm rusty. Oh no. Okay, well I misdropped, but that's good because we want to do a couple more examples. So in this one, okay, I can't think of a pre-memorized setup that I have that works in this situation, and so we're just gonna freestyle. And you'll see, hopefully, the freestyle will work. Sometimes it just doesn't, right? And that's, you know, sometimes I'm just not good enough, but it happens, okay? But we're just gonna try to accomplish the same thing. So we're trying to get a flat center, and we're trying to use the appropriate number of pieces in the right way, okay? And so on my way to a flat center, I want to make sure that I'm keeping this 1-2-1 pattern up, right? And so by placing my second T piece like this, instead, maybe some of you might want to keep it like this because it keeps a flatter left side, but we want to keep our center flat as quickly as possible. And so by placing it here, I'm actually allowing to transition to the mid game because it's causing the flat plane where we can start putting our S's and J pieces. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then if you guys noticed, there's still one more goal I haven't accomplished, which is that I still need to put a Z piece somewhere. There's still not a perfect opportunity to do it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way. The problem with that is that it creates a hanging S piece. But again, I already see a way out of that because I've been good about keeping my left side flat, that I can just dump the piece right there. And just like that, we've transitioned into normal ST stacking. So you see that, like, even though I didn't have a pre-memorized setup there, as long as we keep the fundamentals correct, there's usually a way to ST stack anyway. So this is just normal. We're just continuing to do things as per usual. And I guess I can show one more example, unless we want to get to the resetting part, do we? I guess I can just go on and play until reset in this case. So, okay, so you see here, I've used an extra Z piece in the middle, and that's in preparation for the reset that I know is coming. You don't have to do it early, you can do it later. But because I know that a reset is coming soon and that I'm gonna have to use 2 T pieces in the center like this, I've just gone ahead and done it kind of early. And you see that like, because of this, I actually did it slightly early, so this is gonna get like a little bit scary, but like it still works out. It should anyway. But yeah, so you see like now that I've done the reset, that this will now turn into a regular ST stack. I did mess up my flat center a little bit, and so that's something that we have to address now, but that's sort of a separate issue. You guys saw how the reset worked, right? So then once you understand the reset, I guess let's just go over one more example before ending the video. So again, in this case, we have the iSpin setup again. And the fact that the iSpin setup worked so many times in this example, it's not a fluke. The iSpin setup for me is the most consistent one, and it's the one that I use the most often for sure. And so once again, this is kind of awkward because the Z piece is here, and we want to use that in the setup, right? But then that's going to make the J piece isn't coming soon enough, I guess. And so we want to just dump it in the left side in this case, instead of using the Z plus J combo in the center the way that we would normally. And we have our flat center. We've used our 2 Z pieces, our two T pieces, and so now we can just continue as normal, right? A little bit of a finesse error there. I don't know if you guys caught that, but yeah. So in this case, obviously actually, okay, we'll play on because this is an interesting situation, right? So the O piece has come too soon, and so I have no place to put it. And so what do? Well, our center is getting pretty weird now, right? And so this is something that we're gonna have to deal with because it's going to bite us eventually, and no promises that I can deal with it. But it looks like we have found our way out. But in the process of finding the way out, we actually created I think we created a hanging T piece, S piece. I actually lost track, so I'm not sure if it's hanging. It might not be. Oh, it is. Yeah, I thought it was, but then it didn't look like it in my next piece queue. So we're gonna have to find a place to put that extra S piece eventually. So in this case, I'm just gonna put it here now. So you see, I was just like looking on the left side until I found a situation where I could put the hanging S. And then as soon as we get the next I piece here, we're gonna be back to normal, and this is a perfectly fine setup. So that's it for my examples. Let me just go back to my PowerPoint real quick. And yeah, so this is the end of the video. I wanted to give huge shout outs to Flamewheel. There's no way he's watching this video because he is not involved in the Tetris community at all anymore. But Flamewheel was one of the people who first introduced me to competitive Tetris way back in the day. He wrote a huge guide on teamliquid.net. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember teamliquid.net, but that's what all of us used before Reddit was super popular for StarCraft commentary back in the day. And honestly, like, people talked about all sorts of stuff on Team Liquid. It wasn't just StarCraft, even though it was like made for just StarCraft. And now to this day, Team Liquid is like a top esports team. But back in the day, Team Liquid was just a forum site that we all used to talk about stuff on. And Flamewheel, to celebrate, I believe, I don't know, I think it was his 10,000th post, he wrote a huge guide on ST stacking. And that guide is one of the first things that actually got me into competitive Tetris. Because before that guide, I just kind of played freestyle, and I didn't understand that there was this much depth to the game. And then I just wanted to say to everyone, please stay safe, because coronavirus is here, and I know it's pretty spooky. I live in New York City, so I'm right in the heart of it. I see ambulances going by all the time. It's really scary. Shelter in place. It's pretty stressful. But, you know, us gamers, like, we're used to staying inside anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. It kind of sucks for me because I'm used to dancing a lot, and I can't really do that anymore. but it's all good. And a side effect is that now I have a lot of free time, and so finally the tutorials are back. So hope you guys enjoyed it. New tutorials hopefully soon. I know I always say soon, but this time, you know, because it's quarantine anyway, hopefully I do have time. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.